Hello, my name is Oyebimpe Omolara Oyegbola. This presentation is delivered from the perspective of ACAS, the Adversary, Conciliation and Arbitration Service, which supports employers and employees in resolving workplace disputes. I will examine the representation and employee voice at U and URS Care Group. I'll be focusing on migrant care workers. I'll also critically analyze power, equity, and voice using employment relations theory, legislation, and academic research. After that, I'll be recommending one strategic option for both the workforce and the management. On my table of contents, it explains what this analysis is all going to be about, each of the sections that I'll be touching on. I will first set the context of migrant labor in the UK care sector, then outline the legal framework. I will also critically analyze equity and power using inequality regimes before evaluating strategic options available to workers and management. As stated in Introducing Employment Relations, a critical approach by Williams. The book stated that the UK care sector faces chronic labor shortages due to low pay, long hours, and poor job security. These issues has led to significant reliance on migrant workers, particularly under the health and care worker visa. While migrant labor sustains the sector, this dependency also creates vulnerability as workers often feel unable to challenge unfair treatment due to the fear of job loss or visa consequences. They are afraid that if they speak up, they're going to lose their job or lose their sponsorship, so they remain silent. Academic authors Dundon, Colonnane, and Wilkinson, in their book, a very short, fairly interesting, and reasonably cheap book about employment relations, they explain that precarious work weakens employee voice. In this particular case, the U and URS case, migrant workers are tied to their employer through their visa sponsorship. Many of them are employed via agencies, so which means they have limited or no voice at all. And there is also little formal consultation. This combination increases managerial power and discourages workers from raising concerns. The combination is very dangerous because this will make workers not to be able to speak up even when they are not okay with the working conditions. Touching on the legal context, the Equality Act 2010 protects workers from discrimination based on certain protected characteristics such as race and nationality. Also, the Employment Rights Act 1996 also provides basic rights including protection from unfair dismissal and so many other protections. In addition to that, agency workers regulations in 2010 also aim to ensure equal treatment after 12 weeks for agency workers. But the issue here is most of these employers always try to ensure that their agency workers are not able to meet the standard because they give them shifts in patterns that they might not be able to meet up with the 12-week standard. However, as highlighted by an academic author, Dibin, and his colleagues in employment relations, in the book A Critical and International Approach, he stated that legal protection does not always translate into real power. Where workers lack collective representation, he's basically saying if there's no collective representation of the employees, they will probably not have no power at all. I mean, how can they have power? How can one person speak up? If that one person speaks up, what if the other person is not interested in speaking up? What happens then? That person will likely lose their job or lose their sponsorship. So they are afraid to speak up, and so they remain silent. So the author is basically saying that for there to be real power, there needs to be collective representation. Power in employment relations is not evenly distributed. Employers control work allocation, they control visa, and they also control pay. As Blyton and Turnbull argue in their books Dynamics of Employee Relations, they stated that where voice mechanisms are weak, employers dominate decisions making. If employees cannot speak up, then it means that the employers have absolute power that corrupts. Because obviously nobody's going to fight for their right, nobody's going to question them or challenge them. So they're going to have absolute power in decision making. In this particular case, the U and URS case, workers here actually have little or no influence at all over their working conditions. And this reinforces inequality. They can't speak up, they can't even control. Workers have GPS tied to them just to ensure that they go to work. They are not okay with this, but what can they do? How can they speak up? What is the solution? Keaton and Green, in the Dynamics of Managing Diversity, describe inequality regimes as organizational practices that reproduce disadvantage. In care work, inequality is shaped by gender, by migration status, and class. Migrant women are overrepresented in low-paid care roles with limited progression, reinforcing systematic inequality once again. There are lots of women in care sector, and a lot of women in care sector actually have to deal with terrible working conditions, and this actually reinforces inequality. Ayman, in the political economy of industrial relations, argues that where collective organization is weak, workers are more likely to remain silent or leave employment rather than challenge unfairness. I mean, who is going to speak up? They will rather leave than challenge unfairness. This is evident in this particular case, the U and URS case, where the satisfaction is high, but voice is limited. The employees are very dissatisfied with the conditions of their employment. Nobody wants to go to work with GPS tied to them. Nobody wants to be treated like a second-class citizen, just like in this particular case. But they can't speak up because of fear. They're afraid. My recommendation to these workers is for them to join the Independent Workers' Union of the Great Britain. Independent unions often focus on precarious and migrant workers. As noted by Dondon and his colleagues, he stated that unions provide collective voice, legal support, and protection against victimization. So this means that if the employees at U and URS can actually join this union, they will likely have the power through a collective voice I mean, there's strength. There's strength in number. If they can all come together as employees to join this particular union, this union will probably be able to speak for them and fight for their rights. Although smaller unions have fewer resources, they might not have enough resources, but this particular union, the IWGB, their approach actually aligns well with migrant care workers' needs. So I recommend them. As for management, I recommend that they practice a softer HR approach through a works council. Golden Smith, in Where is the Human Resources, they argued that participatory mechanism actually improve trust and reduce conflicts. So if the employers allow the employees to speak up, if they listen to them and they listen to their concerns through a work council, they can probably work out a solution that will make everybody happy. A works council allows dialogue without preventing unionization, aligning well with ACAS best practice. I am choosing these options. I'm recommending these options because they actually rebalance power. They enhance voice and they also support long-term employment relations stability. Because the goal here is to ensure that there's a good employment relationship between the employers and the employees. The goal is for them to come to a good conclusion that can make them to have an amicable working relationship. These solutions are more sustainable than anti-union strategies, which often increase conflicts. We don't want conflicts. We just want the employees to be happy, and we also want the employers to be happy. We just want the employees to be able to speak up for themselves and to fight for their rights. In conclusion, the U and URS case highlights how migrant care workers experience unequal power and limited voice. Effective representation, supported by collective structures, is actually essential to addressing inequality and also improving employment relations. In my research and analysis, I actually used a couple of books. I found a couple of books very useful in bringing up this presentation, in arranging this presentation. One of the books that I used is by Dondon and his colleagues. That book was particularly helpful for me in understanding employee voice. It's helped me a lot. Also, the book by Williams also provided a critical framework for analyzing power in employment relations. These sources informed my analysis, and I referenced using the Cite Them Right Harvard style. These are my list of references. Thank you so much for listening. Do have a nice day. Bye.